will live. In a temperature of about 50 degrees C, no life will exist. Nobody will live. No, with 37 degrees C, 38 degrees C, people shout. So you cannot imagine where the temperature rises beyond 100 degrees C. Then at night, all the radiations will escape, arriving at temperature minus degrees C. That is below freezing point. So no life will exist in such situation. And in the next slide, we'll look at the composition of the gases that are in the atmosphere. Look at it. You see all the gases, the nitrogen, the oxygen, the carbon dioxide, the hydrogen, the methane, and the ozone, and you see their natural composition. These natural compositions are very, very relevant to our discussion because under these natural compositions, the earth functions maximally or in its optimum state. Now, what we are suffering today as a result of climate change is because there have been unalterations in these natural concentrations of the gases in the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide has increased in its concentrations. Methane has increased in its concentrations. Ozone has decreased. Ozone has decreased in its natural concentration. So the three gases that are very important here in our discussion are the carbon dioxide, the methane, and the ozone. And we see why they are very, very important. So, like I would say, note that we are suffering what we are suffering today and what we call climate change today because the carbon dioxide and the methane concentration increased, while ozone concentration decreased. Now, okay, we talked about briefly talked about functions of the atmosphere. We say it regulates the quantity and quality of the flow of the following. The atmosphere regulates the flow of light into the earth, regulates rainfall, regulates wind, temperature, humidity, and it is the atmosphere itself that creates our climate. And it is the climate that and the atmosphere that the energy and other materials are distributed. So you can now see that without the atmosphere, there'll be no life. So now, having said that, another concept we look at is weather in our discussion. Because people mistake weather for climate, to clarify it. And weather is defined as change in the atmospheric condition of a place over a short period of time, daily or weekly or monthly, yearly or so. Even as we are talking, it can start to rain now. In the part of the country where I'm in, Port Harcourt, River State, it's not cold, it's not warm, but it can start to rain now, and everything will be cold. I would say that weather has changed. So weather changes per moment. It can be shining now, the next seconds, everywhere will be cloudy, and they start to rain, and everywhere will be cold. So what happens that time is weather change, and not a climate change. But climate is the change in atmospheric conditions or in the weather conditions of a place over a long period of time, especially over a 30 years minimum. So it then means that before we'll be able to say that climate has changed, we would have observed a particular change for over about 30 years. If such change has been constant, say, climate has truly changed. Now, what are the factors that create climate? We have what is called the insolation. Insolation is a measure of the amount of solar radiation that falls on the Earth's surface. So, a measure the amount of solar radiation that comes into the Earth's surface is known as the insolation. And albedo, albedo, which is a measure of how reflective a surface is. So that is why it's expected that as solar radiation is hitting the Earth's surface, it is reflected back. Majority of them is reflected back, and that is the function of the eyes. The ice region, the Antarctica, and the rest of them. Most of them, the oceans, and the rest of them, because um, whitish materials reflect light easily, and that is why when you are wearing a black material, for those who don't know, black materials has zero reflection. They receive the sunlight or the sun rays and retains the heat and generate it in your body. So you feel hot during the hot season more when you are wearing a black material than somebody is wearing a white material. Because most of the sun rays that are falling on that materials are reflected back into the atmosphere. So that's why when you have so much vegetation, they help to retain because they are somehow black in their dark in nature. They help to retain most of the radiations coming into the Earth's surface. But some seas, the icebergs and the ice regions, the Antarctica, the Arctic regions, and the rest of them are reflecting most of the sun into the atmosphere. And of course, when they reflect them, there will be no need to melt them. They will not be able to melt them. You see, both of them play their relevant function. It is good some amount of sun radiations are converted into heat and reflected. It's also important that most of the sun radiations are reflected back into the atmosphere in order to maintain a balance. So when this balance is not there, there is a problem. So balance in the amount of sun rays coming into the atmosphere, into the Earth's surface, and the energy, sun energy leaving is very, very important to keep the Earth working optimally. So I put there the composition of the atmosphere. Of course, we have seen the gases that compose of the atmosphere in our previous slide. So I added a note there that says that any alteration in the composition affects weather and by extension the climate. It causes the entrance and the exit of solar radiation in each self-regulating pattern will be distorted. So when this distortion occurs, there will be distortion in the climate system. There will be distortion in the amount of rainfall that we get, in the amount of temperature that we experience, in the amount of humidity that we experience. Um, in the next slide, we'll look at climate change itself. How do we define climate change? I have three definitions here, but I think we'll take the first one that was given in 1992 by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which says that climate change is a change of the climate which is attributed directly or indirectly to human activities that alters the composition of the global atmosphere, and which is in addition to natural climate variability observed over a comparable time. So this definition has indicted human activities. Human activities as being responsible to the alteration of the climate. And what are these human activities? Of course, the burning of fossil fuel, the burning of fossil fuel energies, such as the fuel, and uh, anyway, let me not say burning of fossil fuel energy, use of fossil fuel energies to drive human activities. And what are these fossil fuel energies? The coal, the crude oil, and the natural gas. And what are these human activities that are driven by the use of the fossil fuel? Well, of course, industries, manufacturing and production industries, the construction industries, transportation industries, the tourism industries, agriculture. We have mechanized farming. We use the fossil fuel to power the machines, tractors that are used. Not only even burning the fossil fuel. Some parts of the world, people still practice what's they called now, slash and burn, where a whole forest will be slashed and set ablaze. When you set a forest ablaze, the whole thing, what we are doing is to releasing all the carbon that are stored in those trees. We set ablaze back into the atmosphere. Some people do logging, both legal and illegal. When you cut down trees, you have removed a source for carbon. Well, by the time we would fly to the US or any country of the world, we use the aircraft. The buses we use emit a lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere because they are powered by the fossil fuel energy. So that's why human activities are being indicted. Even in our cement manufacturing industries, we use the fossil fuel to power the machines and the cement. And if you have gone around where cement is produced, you see particulate matters, dusts, let me put it in a local balance, that are released into the atmosphere. Those dusts are also a component of, what's they call, we'll meet it later, a component of greenhouse substances or gases. So that's the definition of climate change. And when we talk about human activities, we talk about use of fossil fuel in driving some of our production activities or manufacturing activities, even in agriculture. And we look at factors that contribute to climate change. Let's leave the number one and number two. There are natural factors that don't harm easily, the Milankovitch cycles and volcanic eruptions. So, but the definition by UNFCCC have indicted human activities such as the use of burning of fossil fuels in making cement in agriculture and in productive production and construction industries, even in transportation industries. And I put a note there that these factors result in a change in the intensity and distribution of energy reaching the atmosphere as surface. Thus, energy imbalance is created. But among other factors, human activities have been blamed, mostly due to intense use of fossil fuels to power economy, since the 1750s industrial revolution. Wow. So let's look at two climate change phenomena. What are the climate change phenomena? One is ozone layer depletion. What does it mean? It means the destruction of the ozone layer. You know, initially when I brought out the table of gases that that made up the atmosphere, I said that why the concentration of carbon dioxide increases, carbon dioxide and the methane increases, the concentration of ozone decreases. Why? Because it's being depleted. What do you mean? It's being chopped up. It's being reacted to, being reacted with by some gases, and such gases include the chief gas include chlorofluorocarbon, is known as CFCs. These are the gases that are reacting to reacting with the ozone layer, as a result, depleting it or causing it to shrink. And how does it lead atmosphere? How does it lead to climate change? When it shrinks, holes are created. And when the holes are created, we now have permissible, or let me say, we now have some rays hitting the Earth's surface directly from the sun, because ozone layer is a layer that seals up the Earth from the sun. It's like using an umbrella. We can see ozone layer as an umbrella that we are using to shield ourselves from having a direct contact from the sun. But when that umbrella is perforated, which can be likened to depletion, you see that we have some patches, some rays permeating to touch us directly, because the umbrellas have now holes and eyes and nose that allow the sun to touch us directly. And we have large amount of sunlight touching us or coming into the earth's surface. But in 1985, in Montreal, there was a convention that came up with a pronouncement that is known as Montreal Protocol, that banned use of ozone depleting substances in the manufacture of our goods. And since then, fluorocarbons are used as coolants in our refrigerators and ACs. They are used as aerosol. That is in manufacture of our perfume. These are things that push out the perfume or insecticide when you try to spray. So, but since then, it is on record scientifically that the ozone layer that was depleted then is recovering. But I can't stand here or stay here to state the rate or the extent of recovery. I can't stay here to state the extent of recovery, but some scientists have tried to reduce the extent to which they talk about ozone layer depletion as one of the phenomena that lead to climate change, because it has been scientifically proven that the depleted ozone layer is recovering, is healing. But the next phenomenon is greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect is still on the rise on a daily basis, and which is also some gases coming together to form a blanket or to form another layer. And what does it do? This layer again traps heat that have been generated in the atmosphere. On the Earth's surface, and does not allow those heat to escape. Now, let me explain this. two processes are involved when we discuss climate change. One process is that radiations from the sun enter the Earth's surface. And when it enters the Earth's surface, it's converted into heat. And at night, the heat converted on the Earth's surface is expected to escape. Now, you have two layers that are making sure that the balance of energy is maintained. One layer is ozone layer that is not allowing so much radiation to enter the Earth's surface. And another layer is the layer formed by greenhouse gases. These greenhouse gases allow the radiation from the sun to pass through them as they are into the Earth's surface. But they are too stubborn that they don't allow the heat converted on the Earth's surface to escape at night. So what happens? The heat generated today will remain, or most of them will remain on Earth's surface today. They won't escape into the atmosphere. Am I still being heard? Hello, everyone.
Yes, Prof.
Okay. So now if the heat retained on the Earth's surface converted on the Earth's surface is retained today. Remember, tomorrow we'll go to another cycle where we'll have sun rays that will come. Heat is converted and they are retained, and that is what is happening. And over a 30-year period, over a 100-year period, you see that we now have a lot of heat on the Earth's surface. We now increase in the heat on the Earth's surface. And it is this increase of heat on the Earth's surface that is referred to as global warming. That is referred to as global warming and referred to as global warming. So, what does it do? Okay, a simple definition now, if you want to have a technical definition of global warming, it just increase in global atmospheric temperature. So you now see the reason global temperature is increasing on a daily basis. And this is the cause of the problem we are having, causing a lot of cyclone in the north, in the global west or global north, causing a lot of hurricane, forest fires, and the rest of them. We see them later. So that is it. And how do we simply understand this global warming greenhouse effect? If you have gone to a car, what enter a car 3-4 hours under the sun, you see that the moment the doors are opened, you experience some amount of heat inside that have been generated inside that car. Yes, you won't enter the car immediately. That's what the exemplars of greenhouse effect. That's a good analogy of greenhouse effect. What happens is that the glasses of the car allows heat to enter through it into the car. I mean, the radiations from the sun to enter into the car. And once it enters into the car, those radiations are converted into heat. And the glasses of the car do not allow the heat that have been generated inside the car from escaping. And it remains there. So if the car remains there in the night, it will cool off. Tomorrow morning, more radiation will enter. And that's what happens on Earth. And that's why we have so many alterations. So, and examples of these greenhouse gases include the carbon dioxide, include methane. Methane is the strongest greenhouse gas, but it doesn't last long on the atmosphere. you have nitrous oxide, you have water vapor, then particulate matter. Though some people also argue that water vapor is the thickest greenhouse, forms the thickest layer of greenhouse, but it doesn't last more than 1 minute or thereabout. It will dissolve. Then followed by methane. Methane is stronger than carbon dioxide, but methane doesn't last long. It lasts between 9 and 12 years, or even 20 years or thereabout, as some people will claim. But carbon dioxide, methane is also in lesser abundance than carbon dioxide. But carbon dioxide is more in abundance, number one, but and lasts longer, lasts between 900 and 1,200 years in the atmosphere. What does it mean? It implies that any carbon dioxide emitted today in the atmosphere to the atmosphere will be there till next 1,000 years. So if except otherwise removed by any natural process, maybe seized into the ocean, which is the largest carbon sink where carbon can be stored or absorbed by the forest. So that's the kind of carbon dioxide. So anyone you emitted lasts for about 1,000 years. And when the ocean is so much heated up, that's when you have hurricane. Every hurricane comes from the ocean. You remember tsunami of 2004, 2005 that affected about 11 countries, about 2 or 3 countries. So that is why we clamor so much about climate carbon dioxide today. So if we trace back to 1750, I don't think that from 1750 to we have reached up to 1,000. No, because a century is just 100. A century. So if you calculate back, I don't know, from 17 to 20, 2000 or whatever, 17 to 19 is about 200 years, isn't it? So now this is the 200 and something years that we are. So it's by 2100, we should be counting about 300 years old of industrial revolution. So it means that all the carbons that have been emitted since the 1750 industrial revolution are in the atmosphere and will keep emitting, and that is piling up. As a result, forming thicker and thicker layers that is causing greenhouse effect, and that's why the climate is heating up every day, warming up every day. We have increased global warming incidence, except the carbon that were taken away by the trees and corn. Everything you see in a tree is carbon. All the tree stems and branches, excuse me, is carbon. Sorry, excuse me. So that is it. Now we look at effects of climate change. Well, you see melting of glaciers. You see that we have a serious decrease in the ice in the Antarctica. So what is the implication? The implication is that, remember, we have said that most of the sun rays region are reflected back into the atmosphere. So when these glaciers have been melted, when they have shrunk, it then means that we have more sun rays that are returned on Earth's surface. And what does it result to? Sea level rise. When most of these ice are melted, they emptied into the oceans empty into the seas. and you have our coastal areas flooded. And you have sea levels rising from there. You see that our coastal areas are flooded. When the coastal areas are flooded, the hinterlands will also enjoy the flooding or suffer from the flooding. And it's not when the coastal areas are flooded. What do we have? Many communities being submerged into the ocean. And River State here, there are a lot of documentaries that have shown that many communities, I think I can even show it. God help me. I think I can share it. Such a documentary, um, such a documentary that shows that many communities have been submerged as a result of the climate change, melting of the glacial region and coastal erosion. And uh, I think it's on the platform now, so that you can watch it at your convenient time to actually understand how serious it is. That is not a fairy tale, And for those of us who are watchful, you can see that since 2012, we have been experiencing a lot of flooding. A terrible one. I think we had that too. The one of South Africa, I've taken over 100 people, and the one of DR Congo has taken about, as at the last time I listened to it, it took about eight people. And I will also tell you what happens in Nigeria. People go into it and roads are destroyed. And Nigeria will quickly blame the opening of dam in Cameroon. Why was that dam? Why was that dam not being opened before 2012? Why is it now that the dam is open? Because the sea level has not risen to the point that will warrant opening of that dam. But because of rising sea level, that dam now got flooded every 2 years to the point that if it's not open, if the water in the dam is not evacuated, then the dam will break. And if the dam explodes, well, Cameroon will be in trouble, Nigeria will be in trouble. So, and that's why they evacuate the water there. And our government will complain. Then why can't government build another greater dam that will receive all those waters and see how they direct them into and they can't even, how will you direct them into the Atlantic Ocean? It will pass through our canals and flood communities and states. And people's crops, people's life, people's buildings will be destroyed. So that's what actually happens. So, and that shows that, yes, climate change is for of our voice towards making sure that solution is extreme weather events such as storms and hurricanes in the United States of America. You pity them and some other European countries. And if you watch, hurricane comes from the ocean, Gulf of Guinea and coast. Why? Because of the excess heat in the ocean as a result of global warming. And once the oceans warm up, they revolt. You see why I support my mother and co who said that it's anger of the gods. The goddess of the river will be angry because of too much heat, and it will revolt. The river itself will be angry and revolt. I said, no, I've never experienced this kind of heat before. It will act against humanity who caused that excess warming of the ocean. So that is it. Then you have change the rainfall pattern. You will believe with me that up to March this year, it didn't rain. It didn't rain in Port Harcourt. is in Niger Delta region. It's unusual. Even in my village, it didn't rain at all in March. Meanwhile, before this thing became intense and extreme, my village in Imo State, we experienced first rain mid-February. Then we'll start to prepare for farming. So what it implies is that farmers will relax. They will not be able to count on because they are not expecting, they didn't see them when they expected it. And anyone that does anything blindly will have few more happen to be blamed because their crops are planted in the ground, we get heated up. And if it happens, we run the risk of having food insecurity. Then you have increased heat waves. Heat waves kill people. We also have drought. And you know that drought, increased heat waves and drought have been associated with the emergence or insurgence of armed bandits like Boko Harams and the other bandits in the northern region. Because of this drought, the Lake Chad basin dried up. The livelihood activities that used to take place there, like fishing and other commercial activities, are no longer there. The youth became so idle, and another source of livelihood was introduced to them, and they keyed into it. And even, of course, you know that in the Borno state where the Lake Chad is, you have herdsmen there, cattle rearers. And since there's no longer water, cattle rearing became difficult. And some of them from Borno, Sokoto, moved their cattle, their herds down to the middle belt, where the middle belt is predominantly farmers, and they're not competing with the farmlands that the farmers are using. Just 3 days ago, we also have another fatal crisis that took not less than 60 people. If you watch online, it's being posted everywhere. Of course, the president said it's going there on Wednesday. If what I read online is correct. So, and if you watch, you see that before this issue of global warming and drought became intense, we were not having these clashes in the Middle Belt. The Middle Belt was peaceful. Northern Nigeria was the most peaceful place you can go and reside, except when it was religious crisis in Kaduna and the Kaduna. That's all. And it was a why. Something must trigger it. Maybe what is it called now? If there's an act of blasphemy and the youth react and the other people counter react, then you have crisis. Apart from that, it's very any part of northern Nigeria is a place you can close your eyes that you want to go and relax and rest. But now people fear to go to northern Nigeria. I prayed to do my youth service in the north, any part of the north, but now nobody prays to go there for youth service because of the issue surrounded by climate change. But our government is not seeing this analysis. It's not seeing it. So, but it's part of what we are talking about. So that's how you see that climate change can affect a whole country. And then ocean acidifications, night warming, outbreaks of pests, resource scarcity, loss of sources of livelihood, migration, and conflict. These are the things you see. That insecurity. I've tried to do some analysis of all these things. That's why I'm running now. Loss of human lives and the rest of them. Then we have, what are these impacts? Impacts of climate change on humans. I've tried to talk about it. We have a concept of polycrisis nexus that the climate change has created. I've tried to explain it briefly, and we'll have this poly crisis is the where crisis is at the every one of these acts generate, and one making the other one worse. You see environmental pollution causing climate change, and climate change leading to migration. As I explained before, that because of climate change and global warming, you have drought in the north because of the encroachment of desert, Sahara Desert into Nigeria, and you have the shrinking of the Lake Chad, and the Lake Chad region now the livelihood activities that take place there, like fishing and set drying of fishing and sale of fishing, cattle rearing, and the rest of them, no longer take place there. So some people take up arms. Some herders move downwards. That's migration. And they move downwards to come and compete with the farmers over their own farmland. That's why they are killing them. And the farmers are saying, no, you can't match your cattle and your heads into our farmland. And moreover, your heads are spoiling our crops. You see crisis, scarcity, then loss of livelihood, then conflict. Now, this conflict is insecurity. The place is no longer secured. Then, because of this crisis, if we see the heads, the crops of the farmers, or the crisis will erupt, farmers no longer go to farm. They have Boko Haram people tasking community people who wants to go to farm to pay. To, they will farm, and you have food insecurity. Then when people don't farm, they have nothing to eat, they have nothing to sell. They become more poor, extremely poor. And most it only happen in the north, something happens in the south. There's a community in southern Nigeria local government area. I forget it almost. Yeah, to the community. Divided into two by floor. Half or something like that. So, I mean, and people go as about and yeah, and one second when they have they become more poor. And even now
Hello, sir.
I don't think seeing a I'm seeing something that says I'm no longer presenting. What happened?
I don't know, but you can present again. I don't know what happened from the end.
But you're hearing me.
Yes, but we just saw that your presentation is off. It just went off.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
You know, okay, so I can continue.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I can continue.
Yes, sir. We'll be done with this session by 9:30, sir.
Okay, I'm almost
All right, sir. Thank you.
finishing. Are you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
So we look at realistic and socially just solutions to climate change. We'll talk about agroecology, use of organic fertilizers under food system. We'll talk about climate and weather modifications, that is end to pollution, especially from fossil fuels and under and leaving the oil in the ground. And if you are leaving the oil in the ground, what do? We migrate to renewable energy. That's use of solar and wind energy. Then under agriculture, we'll talk about mixed cropping and the rest of them. And what are the action strategies as environmental rights crusader that we should be taking? That's very important to this class. And I can say that this knowledge is not meant for us to acquire and keep. We need to advance this knowledge. So we need to engage in environmental climate change education, educating people about the consequences of all this, what climate change is all about. We need to go for advocacy. We need to go for advocacy, public awareness campaigns. Advocacy, the essence of advocacy is to effect both behavioral and policy changes. Convince our lawmakers to make strong regulations that would lead to environmental protection. There are a lot that are involved, and time will not permit me to stay go into it because I think we still have so many things to talk about that I will summarize. We'll talk about public awareness campaigns, lobbying and negotiations. Okay, for policy change within our capacity building and making our disciples, which is what we are doing. So I have to commend the upward echo. I think upward echo.
Correct, sir. Yes.
Thank you very much. This is part of capacity building and making of disciples, people that will join and the advancement of climate change education and amplifying the voices, so that the world will hear and we advance a common cause that will make sure that things, the causes of climate change are reversed. Then networking and collaborations, we identify other organizations and individuals of like minds and common focus and join them, collaborate them in actions, join them in the actions they are taking and get them to join us in the actions we are taking to achieve a common goal, and which is mitigating climate change. You can take legal actions. We can also do media outreach. Go to media houses and talk about what you have learned this night. And let the world hear, let the public hear about it. It's part of the media awareness campaign. And it will shock you that many people have not had this kind of a thing before. Too many people, they will tell you, those that want to be sincere, then engage in research and innovations and join in direct actions. What are these direct actions? Protest, petitions, boycott, sit-ins. These are agitations, campaigns. These are actions we join in order to put pressure on government and corporations to take appropriate environmental actions to make sure that our environment is protected. Then our next target is to join in the education advocacy action. Who are we going to reach out to? The general public. That is our focus. And general public includes school clubs. I mean, these are very vital for and how we get it. Which is a non-profit organization, public government organizations, uh, community-based organizations, indigenous groups, even the local community, and tell them, yeah, it is anger, how the anger started, and where and the action for it to go. Correct. So the president, the journalist, what they did to this education was how political resistance will of a different government can even bring this to some people when but these people of the situation they can conduct fake research that prove climate fake and have to propagate that message that climate change is fake and the public will assume it and that is information. So they have allow them to value in, because when share